The candles drip fat tears down their waxen bodies, glowing like 100 watchful eyes in the narrow Roman street. The year is 1493, and tonight this city does not sleep. You feel the cobblestones humming beneath your feet, alive with gossip and restless anticipation. Somewhere beyond these twisting alleys, inside a palace smothered in velvet and gold, Lucrezia Borgia is being married. You don't need to be told twice that the Borgias are dangerous. Their very name is a warning whispered behind fans and muttered after too much wine. And now, one of their daughters is stepping into a role that will be sung about in taverns and dissected in Vatican chambers for years to come. You probably won't survive this story, if not from scandal, then from the sheer weight of poison rumours. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know your location and what time it is as you're listening. I love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push closer toward the heart of the city where the torches burn higher and the laughter spills out of every doorway. Rome is not a modest place, not anymore. Since Rodrigo Borgia secured his seat as Pope Alexander VI, the Eternal City has been rebranded into a theatre of excess. Marble glitters with stolen gold, cardinals parade like princes, and the Vatican itself feels less like a house of God than a stage for earthly appetites. Tonight's wedding is not just a family celebration, it is a public announcement that the Borgias, love them or hate them, are not going anywhere. Lucrezia herself is just 13, though the painted lips and carefully arranged braids of spun gold try to convince you otherwise. She is said to be charming, sweet, even gentle, but her surname weighs on her like a crown forged of thorns. Her father is the Pope, her brothers, Cesare and Juan, wield daggers behind their smiles. You feel the crowd pressing in with you, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the girl who will be given away like a rare coin in a political exchange. She steps forward, every jewel in her hair glinting like a promise, or a threat, and the city notices. You can almost hear the collective intake of breath as she crosses the courtyard. A living emblem of everything the Borgias want to project: power, beauty, and untouchable legitimacy. Yet underneath the fanfare, whispers coil. Already bets are being made in smoky corners. Will this marriage last? Or will it end like so many others in annulments, betrayals, and blood? Mainstream historians will tell you this: her marriage to Giovanni Sforza of Pamzero was meant to cement an alliance with a powerful northern family. Simple politics, nothing more. But in the fringe corners of gossip you hear a different refrain, that the union was a spectacle staged less for love than for the city itself. A reminder that even in matrimony, the Borgias commanded the script. As you drift through the torchlit streets, the laughter sharpens into song, some celebratory, others satirical. Rome has always thrived on rumour, and tonight it is feasting. Already the tale of this wedding begins to twist in the mouths of poets and rivals. Historians still argue whether the Borgias encouraged this theatrical aura on purpose, or whether it was simply the inevitable byproduct of wielding too much power in too visible a place. But either way, you're here, breathing it in, the incense, the wine, the perfume of roses and sweat, and you cannot shake the sense that what happens behind those palace walls tonight will echo for centuries. You slip into the palace courtyard, drawn forward by the promise of silk and candlelight. The air is heavy with perfume, a sweetness so thick it almost clings to your throat. Then, as the crowd parts, you see her, Lucrezia Borgia unveiled, the girl whose name has already begun to ripple through the streets of Europe, though she has scarcely left her father's side. Her hair, a cascade of pale gold, has been brushed until it shines like threads spun from sunlight itself. Her gown is layered with fabric brought from the east, shimmering with every turn, while the delicate pearls at her neck catch the firelight with a quiet confidence. You might expect her to look frightened, but she doesn't. Not exactly. Instead, there's a composure in her gaze, as though she understands her role perfectly. She is the stage, and every eye tonight is an audience. And yet you know she is only 13. Her face, though powdered and painted, still carries the softness of youth. You can't help but imagine the strange duality she embodies. A child whose family requires her to play at being a queen. The courtiers murmur about her beauty. Some, in hushed tones, say she is destined to outshine even her father's mistresses. Others point to her elegance as proof that the Borgias are touched with divine favour. But beneath these words runs another current, that Lucrezia, innocent or not, carries a surname laced with whispers of poison bottles, betrayals, and midnight intrigues. Historians often debate whether she was truly as naive as her portraits suggest. Was she merely a pawn carefully manoeuvred by her father and brothers? Or did she understand, even at this tender age, that her beauty and charm were weapons sharper than any blade? You watch her smile, a gentle tilt of her lips that looks sweet enough to melt even the hardest of enemies, and yet you can't help but wonder, is that smile a mask taught by her family, or the beginning of her own brand of power? As the procession moves forward, she glides rather than walks. The silk of her gown whispers across the marble floor, as if rehearsed to perfection. You catch glimpses of the details, the hem embroidered with tiny golden knots, the sleeves heavy with jewels that sparkle like captured stars. Every part of her is a performance. Even the way her eyes lower at just the right moment suggests practice. After all, the Borgias did not leave anything to chance. And yet quirks emerge. A small ring, shaped like a dove, sits oddly among the ostentatious jewels, a token she refuses to let go of. Some say it was a childhood gift. Others whisper it hides a secret, a reminder that beneath the glitter and expectations, she is still a girl who once played in gardens rather than council chambers. You wonder if the crowd notices these details, or if they are too dazzled by the image she projects. The night air swirls with speculation. You overhear one nobleman mutter that the Borgias want Rome to see Lucrezia as untouchable purity, unmarred, untainted, a fresh canvas for alliance. Another smirks and whispers that purity itself is nothing but a costume in this city, discarded as easily as silk slippers. Historians still argue whether Lucrezia's innocence was carefully guarded or strategically exaggerated to secure power. Either way, tonight, she plays her role flawlessly. You realize, watching her move through the hall, that she isn't just the bride. She is Rome's newest obsession. Her unveiled face, radiant yet unreadable, is destined to be painted into frescoes, mocked in verses, and dissected in hushed bedroom conversations. And you, standing in the glow of those endless candles, sense that this unveiling is not just about marriage. It is about the birth of a legend, one wrapped in silk perfumed with roses, and shadowed by scandal before the vows are even finished. The music softens, and you finally notice him, the man to whom Lucrezia has just been given. Giovanni Sforza of Pesaro, 30 years old, stands in sharp contrast to the golden-haired bride beside him. His doublet is rich but not ostentatious, stitched in the stern Lombard fashion. His dark beard frames a face that has already learned the art of calculation, the lines at his temples betraying a life of diplomacy and pragmatism. He is no dashing prince from a troubadour's ballad. He is a political choice, and you can feel the weight of that reality pressing on the ceremony like the heavy scent of incense. As Giovanni takes Lucrezia's hand, you sense the mismatch immediately. She is barely past childhood, delicate and glowing, while he is seasoned, his eyes already carrying the exhaustion of power struggles. His family, the Sforza of Milan and Pesaro, are no strangers to treachery themselves. They are ambitious, grasping, and often ruthless. Tonight, Giovanni is less a groom and more a chess piece moved into position by the Pope himself. For Rodrigo Borgia, this union ties Rome's fortunes with northern Italy, securing loyalty, or at least obedience, for the moment. You notice Giovanni's smile. It is polite, practiced, perhaps even forced. Does he feel pride at marrying the Pope's daughter, or does he already sense the trap of it? Some chronicles describe him as weak-willed, a man too cautious to stand against the tidal force of the Borgias. Others portray him as shrewd, a survivor who understood too well that his bride was both blessing and curse. Historians still argue whether Giovanni entered this union willingly, hoping for advantage, or whether he was pressured into it by politics he could not resist. And then there is the gossip. You hear it murmured just beyond the candlelight, that Giovanni is already too old for her, that his vigour is not what it once was, that perhaps this marriage is doomed before it has even begun. Later, in years to come, his very manhood will be dragged through the mud, branded impotent in the cruelest way by Lucrezia's own family when it suits their plans. But tonight, none of that is spoken aloud. Instead, the hall echoes with applause, the polite clapping of nobles who know they are watching history, while privately thinking of how quickly history can turn. Still, a quirk in Giovanni's demeanour catches your attention. Unlike the proud, strutting nobles who surround him, he seems almost wary. When Lucrezia glances up at him, there is no blaze of passion, no tenderness, only a brief, almost mechanical nod. Perhaps he knows the truth, that this marriage has less to do with desire and more to do with contracts inked in candlelight. You feel the irony, sharp and cold. Two lives bound together not by love, but by the ambitions of families who treat people like coins to be exchanged. And yet beneath the surface you sense Giovanni's determination. He may be a pawn, but pawns sometimes cross the board and become something greater. Perhaps he imagines that by marrying Lucrezia he can strengthen his position, guard his small dominion, and shield himself with the Vatican's shadow. The thought would not be foolish. After all, what better protection than the Pope himself as your father-in-law? But Rome is already snickering. In the marketplaces, vendors joke that Giovanni has not married a wife but an empire's noose. In the taverns, bawdy songs suggest that he will be outmanoeuvred before he even touches the bridal sheets. You can almost hear the mocking laughter trailing behind him as he walks, arm in arm with his too young bride. Standing there, watching Giovanni, you realise how fragile his position truly is. He may look like a groom, but tonight he is already a man shadowed by doubt. His figure looms less as a husband and more as a placeholder, destined to be written about, not for his victories but for the scandal that will cling to his name forever. The banquet hall unfolds like a stage, its ceilings painted with saints who seem to frown down upon the revelry below. You step inside and are nearly overwhelmed by the sensory assault. Tables sag beneath the weight of roasted pheasants, gilded platters of marzipan, mountains of candied fruit, and fountains of wine that flow as though Rome has declared itself a second Eden. This is not a simple wedding feast. It is the Vatican flexing its muscles, flaunting wealth and daring anyone to whisper the word piety. The Borgias do not whisper. They shout, and tonight the echo rattles across every marble column. The guests are a living map of Europe's ambitions. Venetian merchants, French envoys, Spanish courtiers, and Italian nobles gather shoulder to shoulder, each more curious about the power plays at hand than the food on their plates. Cardinals sit among them, crimson robes blending seamlessly with velvet cushions, goblets raised high in toasts that mix holy Latin blessings with earthy Italian curses. It is hard to tell where the sacred ends and the profane begins. You glance at one bishop, laughing so hard that wine dribbles down his chin, and wonder how many prayers he will mumble tomorrow to make up for tonight. At the centre of it all sits Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia himself, his heavy frame draped in cloth of gold, his broad smile unashamedly pleased. Every detail of this spectacle is his doing, every morsel of meat and every string of pearls another brick in the fortress of his family's legacy. The Pope has turned his daughter's wedding into a political theatre, where every eye must acknowledge Borgia dominance. Historians still argue whether Rodrigo believed such excess strengthened the church, or whether he simply could not resist the lure of indulgence. Either way, you can see the awe and the envy it stirs in his guests. Yet amid this grandeur, oddities sparkle. One servant brings forth a dish of peacock, its feathers reattached and painted with gold leaf, an extravagant display that seems less about flavour and more about spectacle. Another tray carries sugar the sculptures shaped into mythological scenes, Apollo chasing Daphne across a candied grove. You almost laugh. It is as if the Pope is daring his critics to complain that he has turned Rome into a carnival. And perhaps that's the point. But the feast is not all indulgence. Beneath the laughter, sharp conversations slice through the air. You catch fragments, Milanese envoys muttering about French intentions in Naples, Florentine bankers calculating who will profit from the alliance, Roman nobles scoffing that the Sforza name is already tarnished. Everyone is watching everyone else, weighing alliances, measuring smiles. The marriage may be sealed with vows, but its consequences are being drafted right here, in the flicker of candlelight over silver goblets. And then the entertainments begin. Minstrels pluck lutes, their melodies weaving through the air like threads of silk. Dancers whirl in elaborate costumes, their sleeves trailing like flames. A juggler balances knives while courtiers roar with laughter, and even a trained bear is led through the hall to amuse the guests. You can't help but marvel at the strangeness of it all. A holy father presiding over jugglers and bears, blessing a marriage with one hand while raising a goblet with the other. The line between faith and farce blurs until you are no longer certain whether you're in a palace or a theatre. Through it all, Lucrezia and Giovanni sit at the high table, side by side. She smiles with practiced sweetness, raising her cup when prompted, bowing her head at compliments. He leans stiffly, his posture betraying discomfort, even as he tries to look proud. Around them, laughter swells like a storm. And you realize that every glance cast in their direction is less about them as people and more about what they symbolize. They are not bride and groom, they are chess pieces on a banquet board carved from politics, wine and scandal. And so the night stretches, wine flowing faster, tongues loosening, rumours already being seeded between gulps of mead. You feel it in the air, as thick as incense. This wedding is no mere celebration, it is a declaration. And behind the laughter, the saints painted on the ceiling seem to sigh, as though they too know that this night will be remembered not for love, but for legend. The banquet dwindles, but the night is far from finished. You drift with the crowd as servants swing open heavy velvet curtains, revealing a long corridor lined with flickering torches. Whispers travel faster than footsteps. Everyone knows where the procession is headed, toward the bridal chamber, where spectacle gives way to ritual. You feel a hush ripple through the nobles, as though the entire palace is leaning forward to witness what no one will admit aloud. The most private moment of the new couple becoming public currency. The chamber itself glows with a soft golden haze, its walls hung with tapestries depicting saints, though their embroidered eyes seem scandalized by what is about to unfold. The bed is massive, heaped with silk sheets and strewn with rose petals, as if luxury could disguise what is essentially a political requirement. Lucrezia enters first, her gown whispering against the floor, her face serene but pale. Giovanni follows, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. And then comes the strange part. Guests hover at the threshold, half invited, half expecting, as though their very presence is needed to sanctify or supervise what happens next. This is the custom of presentia testium, the presence of witnesses to confirm the consummation of a marriage. Not that they watch the act itself, of course, but they linger nearby, waiting for proof that bride and groom have fulfilled their duty. A sheet, a stain, a rumour, it doesn't matter which. What matters is that no one can later dispute that the union is complete. You shiver at the thought. Privacy, intimacy, these are luxuries the Borgias cannot afford. Even in bed, Lucrezia is on stage. The story that survives is almost unbelievable. That night it is whispered. The union is not only consummated but repeated. Once, twice, 3 times. A triple assurance that no one could question. Some chronicles suggest this detail was exaggerated by rivals eager to paint the Borgias as lustful, indecent. Others argue the family themselves spread the tale, flaunting virility as proof of strength. Historians still argue whether this thrice consummated night was fact or slander, but the legend clings stubbornly, staining every retelling of Lucrezia's life. And yet, in the room itself, the atmosphere must have been surreal. You imagine the muffled laughter of courtiers waiting beyond the door, the rustle of silk as servants move about, the creak of bedposts echoing louder than it should. Every sound becomes part of the story, every pause, every sigh magnified by the expectation of proof, duty cloaked as passion, politics disguised as intimacy. You almost pity them, 2 people trapped between love and surveillance. Still, quirks emerge in the record. Some later tales claim a bishop stood by with a prayer, blessing the bed as though the union were a holy relic. Others insist a servant carried away the sheets to be paraded as evidence, though whether that's truth or satire is impossible to say. The truth is slippery, and that slipperiness is exactly what makes the story endure, for if it happened once, it is history. If it happened 3 times, it becomes legend. You step back from the doorway, the velvet curtains whispering shut behind you, but the sounds, imagined or real, cling in your ears. This is not romance. It is theatre, and the audience is Rome itself. Tomorrow, every word, every rumour will spill into the streets like spilled wine, staining reputations and fueling rivalries. But tonight, you are close enough to sense the strangeness of it all. A marriage bed turned into a stage, a scandal being written in real time, and a girl whose innocence, real or stage, becomes the currency of Europe's most infamous family. By morning, the whispers are already racing faster than the horses on the Appian Way. You overhear them in the courtyards, in the kitchens, even in the cloisters where monks pretend not to gossip. Last night's bridal chamber has transformed into an inexhaustible well of rumour, each telling more embellished than the last. The official version, that the marriage was dutifully consummated, is bland and unremarkable. The unofficial version, however, is irresistible. Lucrezia Borgia, the Pope's daughter, bedded 3 times before dawn, the sheets carried like relics, the guests smirking knowingly as they poured their morning wine. You can feel how swiftly gossip mutates into weapon. Rome thrives on scandal, and the Borgias, for all their wealth, are perpetual targets. Rivals like the Orsini and the Colonna families don't need proof. Rumour alone is enough to sharpen into daggers. The story of thrice consummated becomes ammunition, a way to paint the Borgias as shameless libertines who turn sacred sacraments into circus acts. For their enemies, this is not just entertainment, it is strategy. Yet there's another layer. Some suggest the Borgias themselves may have encouraged the tale. After all, in a city where virility and power are often equated, what better way to boast of the Sforza groom's vigour and the bride's unquestionable fertility? In a world obsessed with heirs, no one could claim that the union was lacking in passion or productivity. Historians still argue whether the triple consummation was slander designed to humiliate or propaganda designed to impress. Either way, the Borgias found themselves at the centre of the joke, and perhaps they didn't mind. But not all whispers are equal. A satirical song drifts through the streets, mocking the Pope for presiding over such indecency. Street poets snicker about a holy father who marries off his child with one hand while blessing debauchery with the other. In taverns, bawdy jokes grow louder with each cup of ale. 3 times in one night? Even the gods of Olympus would blush. Rome has turned the bridal chamber into an open-air theatre, and the performance is impossible to stop. Still, you can't shake the human side of it. Imagine Lucrezia, scarcely a teenager, waking to find her reputation already transformed into something larger than herself. To her enemies, she is a symbol of corruption. To her family, she is proof of alliance. To the city, she is fodder for satire. But to herself, you wonder if she feels like a girl trapped in a hall of mirrors, each reflection warped by other people's agendas. Odd details stick too. One chronicler claims the Pope himself demanded to see the proof of consummation, though whether this is fact or malicious invention remains unclear. Another insists the courtiers who waited outside heard the bed creaking repeatedly, though the source reads more like a lampoon than a record. Still, these little flourishes feed the legend, until the night becomes less about 2 people and more about the mythology of excess. And you realise something important. Gossip in Renaissance Rome isn't just idle chatter. It is a weaponized art form, capable of destroying alliances, elevating rivals, or reshaping history. The Borgias understood this game, perhaps better than anyone. They knew that even lies, if repeated often enough, could serve as shields or swords. And so the triple consummation, real or not, became another thread in the tapestry of scandal that both weakened and fortified their legacy. By midday, the palace hums with laughter, songs, and speculation. The marriage is only hours old, and already it has been twisted into farce, satire, and weapon. You can almost hear Rome itself chuckling, cruel and hungry, savouring the story like sweetmeat on its tongue. And in that cruel chorus, the Borgias find themselves once again both condemned and unforgettable. The sun has barely crept above the rooftops when you glimpse her again. Lucrezia, the bride whose night has already become Rome's favourite story. She sits at the edge of a courtyard garden, her golden hair still arranged in meticulous braids, though a few strands have slipped loose, softening her face. The morning light paints her less as a Borgia and more as a girl, but the city will not grant her that kindness. To the world, she is no longer just a daughter or a bride, she is both temptress and victim, trapped inside a narrative she did not author. Her expression is unreadable. Some chronicles suggest she wept the next day, overwhelmed by the weight of expectation and scrutiny. Others claim she smiled serenely, wearing the role as though it were a second gown. Historians still argue whether she was frightened, complicit, or already clever enough to recognise that survival meant playing along. But as you watch, you sense the exhaustion behind her poise, the kind that comes not from sleeplessness, but from knowing that your body has been transformed into a public stage. Giovanni stands nearby, his posture stiff, his eyes scanning the crowd with guarded pride. He has accomplished what was required of him, and for the moment that is enough. Yet even in triumph there is unease. He knows the whispers, everyone knows the whispers, and though some paint him as virile, others mock him as boastful or ridiculous. You wonder whether he hears the snickering beneath the congratulations, whether he senses that the story of 3 consummations will cling to him less as glory and more as parody. Still, the rituals of the morning must be observed. Nobles approach with polite compliments, offering gifts of gold, tapestries, even exotic birds, each item less a gesture of goodwill and more a reminder of alliances owed and debts demanded. Priests murmur blessings, their hands heavy on Lucrezia's bowed head, as though sanctifying her body after the long night. You catch sight of her fingers clenching ever so slightly in her lap, as if the prayers weigh more heavily than the jewels. Meanwhile, satirical notes creep into the edges of the celebration. A servant recites a rhyme that likens the bridal chamber to a vineyard, fruitful beyond expectation. Someone smirks and passes a goblet of spiced wine, toasting not the marriage itself but its supposed frequency. You hear laughter behind fans, quick and sharp, and you realize how fragile reputations can be. In a single night, Lucrezia has been elevated to symbol and reduced to caricature. Both truths coexist, impossible to separate. There's also a quirk in the records. One chronicler notes that the bridal chamber door was opened at dawn so that courtiers could greet the couple, a ritual of intrusion that blurs the line between blessing and voyeurism. Was it true, or was it satire, penned by a rival eager to tarnish the Borgias further? Hard to say, but even the possibility makes your skin prickle with discomfort. As you linger in the courtyard, the image of Lucrezia remains fixed in your mind, her hands folded neatly, her eyes lowered just so, her face a mask of composure that conceals what no rumour can capture, the private emotions of a young woman whose life has been consumed by politics. To the world, she is a temptress, a pawn, or both. To herself, she may simply be a girl trying to breathe through the suffocating weight of other people's stories. The morning stretches on, bright and cruel, and you realise that for Lucrezia this is only the beginning. Last night may already be legend, but its echoes will follow her long after the roses wilt and the songs fade. She is no longer simply married, she is ensnared in the theatre of alliances, her every gesture ripe for interpretation, her every sigh destined to be twisted into scandal. Step outside the palace walls, and the city is already alive with noise. Rome, with its twisting alleys and crowded piazzas, has turned Lucrezia's wedding into a carnival of gossip. Bakers joke about it as they knead dough. Water sellers sing about it as they splash buckets into fountains. Every corner seems to echo with laughter, satire, and mockery. You realise that her bridal chamber has become less a room and more a stage that the entire city feels entitled to critique. Songs drift through the streets, bawdy verses invented overnight by poets with more wine than sense. One ballad insists the bed creaked so loudly the saints themselves covered their ears. Another claims Giovanni had to be blessed twice by a priest just to keep going. These are not compliments, they are daggers sharpened with humour. Rome has always thrived on cruelty disguised as entertainment, and the Borgias, so infamous already, make irresistible subjects. Yet amid the jokes there is a sharper edge. Libels are painted on walls, crude drawings that depict Lucrezia as a temptress, Giovanni as a fumbling fool, and Pope Alexander as the grinning master of ceremonies. Passers-by chuckle, shake their heads and move on, but the message lingers. The Borgias may have wealth and power, but in the mouths of the people they are clowns in their own play. Historians still argue whether these satires were spontaneous mockery, or deliberately seeded by rival families eager to wound the Borgias' reputation. Perhaps both. The cruelty is not limited to the common folk. In the salons of noble women, sharp whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you hear?" 3 times, one gasps behind her jewelled fan, another leans closer, adding, "And the Pope himself demanded proof." Whether true or not hardly matters. What matters is the delight of tearing at the Borgia's carefully cultivated image. You see it in their eyes, envy, amusement, and something darker, the satisfaction of imagining Rome's most powerful family humiliated by their own excess. And the poems, oh, the poems. Sharp-tongued satirists compose verses that travel faster than couriers. One likens Lucrezia to Venus herself, but in the next line twists her into Pandora, unleashing shame upon her house. Another lampoons Giovanni as Hercules undone by his own bride, reduced to a figure of ridicule rather than strength. These lines, copied and recopied, spread through taverns and marketplaces until they become part of the collective memory. Even if the truth is lost, the laughter remains. Still, quirks of the tale endure. One pamphlet claims the sheets from the wedding night were displayed in the Vatican gardens, fluttering in the breeze as proof of consummation. Absurd, almost certainly. And yet the absurdity is what makes it believable in a city where scandal feels more credible than virtue. People nod, chuckle, and repeat the story until it hardens into something resembling fact. You walk through the streets and sense how quickly rumour becomes identity. For the people of Rome, Lucrezia is no longer a young bride. She is a symbol of corruption, decadence, and forbidden desire. Her private life has been devoured by the public, and now her name is stitched into songs that will outlive her innocence. Giovanni fares no better. Mocked in bawdy sketches, his dignity crumbling with every crude joke. Even the Pope, basking in power within his gilded halls, finds his authority questioned in rhymes scrawled by drunks. And so, as the city buzzes with cruel chorus, you realise the damage is already done. What began as a wedding has become a myth, a performance replayed in every joke, every satire, every whispered confession. The Borgias may continue to rise, but Rome has branded them with ridicule that no wealth can erase. By now, the story has grown long legs, wandering far beyond Rome's streets. It reaches Milan, Venice, Florence, each city eager to add its own twist, its own spice to the scandal. Yet when you peel back the laughter and the libels, you find yourself asking, did it even happen that way? Was the bridal night truly consummated 3 times? Or is it all smoke and mirrors, woven into legend by enemies and storytellers alike? Historians circle this question like moths around a candle. Some argue the tale was born in malice, a slander crafted by rival families who wanted to humiliate the Borgias by painting them as indecent, almost grotesque in their appetites. Others suggest the Borgias themselves may have leaned into the rumour, using it as a performance of power, proof of Giovanni's virility, proof of Lucrezia's fertility, and by extension, proof of the Pope's ability to forge fruitful alliances. In an age where heirs meant survival, exaggerating passion might have been a strangely practical choice. Historians still argue whether it was slander, propaganda, or some uneasy marriage of both. When you sift through the sources, contradictions abound. The Venetian envoy reports only that the marriage was consummated, nothing more. The Roman street songs, however, insist on 3, laughing with every verse. Chroniclers sympathetic to the Borgias stay quiet, while their enemies write entire pamphlets dripping with innuendo. Which version do you trust? None, or perhaps all of them, understanding that truth in Renaissance Italy was rarely clean. What makes the debate fascinating is not just the number, it's what the number represents. 3 becomes a symbol of excess, of appetite, of scandal too juicy to ignore. Had the story claimed only once, it would have been unremarkable. Twice, mildly interesting, but thrice, that's the sweet spot where fact and rumour blur into myth. The human mind loves exaggeration, and the Renaissance imagination thrived on turning rumour into performance. Still, curious quirks emerge. One historian points out that Giovanni Sforza later accused the Borgias of spreading lies about his impotence, an accusation that suggests the family was indeed willing to manipulate sexual narratives when it suited them. Another notes that Lucrezia, in later years, was described by some as saintly, by others as a femme fatale, proof of how malleable her image remained. In truth, she was likely neither fully innocent nor fully guilty, merely a woman caught in the relentless machinery of politics. You can't help but reflect on how differently her story might have been told if she were a man. A groom who boasted of 3 consummations in one night might have been celebrated, toasted, immortalized as a hero of virility. But a bride, she becomes scandal, satire whispered about in tones dripping with judgment. The same act transforms depending on who performs it, and Lucrezia's legacy is shaped less by her own choices than by the lenses of those who described her. As you stand amid these conflicting narratives, you realize the triple consummation may never be solved. It is both true and false, both slander and strategy, both history and legend. And perhaps that is why it endures. The uncertainty itself keeps the story alive like a candle flame flickering endlessly in the draught. For in the end, people do not remember what actually happened. They remember what they want to believe. So the question lingers, tantalizing and unresolved. Was Lucrezia's wedding night a scandal of flesh? Or merely a scandal of words? You may never know. But Rome didn't need proof then, and we don't need it now. The power of the story lies not in its accuracy, but in its ability to echo through centuries, staining a name forever. The echoes of that night never truly fade. You feel them ripple outward, stitched into the fabric of Lucrezia Borgia's life like a thread that cannot be unpicked. Every time her name surfaces, in whispers of poisonings, in rumours of forbidden affairs, in songs mocking her father's court, the memory of her scandalous wedding clings close behind. She will be many things over the course of her life: pawn, duchess, mother, suspected conspirator. But the tale of 3 consummations in one night remains like a stain on silk, impossible to wash out even when history tries. Her marriage to Giovanni Sforza will not last, of course. Within a few years, the union collapses under accusations of impotence and betrayal, their separation as public and humiliating as the wedding itself. Some chronicles claim the annulment was forced, others that it was strategic, the Borgias already manoeuvring for a better match. But always, that wedding night remains in the background, fueling cruel jokes about a man who could not satisfy his wife, or a family too eager to invent reasons to discard him. Historians still argue whether Giovanni was the victim of slander, or simply an unfortunate pawn sacrificed when the game demanded it. For Lucrezia, the wedding becomes a haunting prologue. Each future alliance she enters is coloured by suspicion, every gesture she makes interpreted through the lens of scandal. In Ferrara, where she will later reign as duchess, she earns respect as a capable ruler, patron of the arts, and even a woman of compassion. Yet even there, whispers from her youth follow her, ghost-like. The Rome that mocked her never entirely lets her go, and so you stand back watching how myth takes root. What began as one night, perhaps exaggerated, perhaps not, has become a story retold for 500 years. Why? Because it is irresistible. It blends politics with intimacy, power with vulnerability, innocence with scandal. It reminds us that history is not only written in treaties and battles, but also in bedrooms, where truth and rumour entwine under silk sheets. There's an odd irony in it too. Lucrezia, often painted as either a saint or a sinner, survives in memory precisely because of stories like this. Had her wedding been ordinary, her name might have faded into the long list of noble brides forgotten by time. But scandal, whether true or not, has the strange power to immortalize. You can almost hear the city of Rome laughing still, its cruel chorus echoing through centuries in order assuring that Lucrezia Borgia is never just another name in a genealogy chart. As the candles gutter low and the streets grow quiet, you realize the legacy is sealed not in marble or gold, but in whispers. Whispers that became songs, songs that became chronicles, chronicles that became history. And through it all, Lucrezia lingers, her wedding night both her curse and her crown. The night has grown softer now, the sharp edges of scandal dissolving into a haze, like the last embers of a fire drifting upward into dark sky. You let the noise of Rome fade, the laughter of taverns dim, the whispers of courtiers fall silent until only the faint hum of memory remains. Lucrezia's story settles into stillness, no longer a stage of silk and candlelight, but a distant echo you can choose to let go of. Breathe deeply. Imagine the velvet curtains drawing closed, the flickering torches extinguished one by one until the hall is empty and the city sleeps. The marble floors are cool beneath your feet, the air tinged with the faintest trace of roses long since wilted. Whatever happened that night, once, twice, or thrice, it belongs now to history, softened by time, harmless in the solemn hush of the memory. You're safe here, cocooned in the present, far away from the intrigues of Renaissance Rome. Let your eyes grow heavy, your thoughts drift like candle smoke, and allow yourself to slip gently into rest. The story has ended, the stage is dark, and silence, at last, has returned.